Stories matter. Our stories matter. We all have stories, the stories of our lives, and too often they go unshared. And I say too often because it has been my experience that just about every memorial service for which I have officiated, that when I meet with the family to prepare the eulogy, I learn significant things about the person who has died that I somehow never managed to learn while they were still among the living. The most recent and memorable example was our dearly beloved Ray White, a long-term member of the congregation who died just over a year ago. Now, I knew Ray as a church member, including regular meetings my first couple of years here when he was a pastoral associate. And I know that there's no way to know everything about someone, even if we know them fairly well. And it wasn't like Ray and I had a whole bunch of opportunities to sit down for heart-to-heart conversations. But I was pretty surprised to find out after he died how much he loved Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Saturday afternoon VU Western matinees as a child turned into a love of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans for Ray, so deep that he spent 15 years researching and writing a book titled King of the Cowboys, Queen of the West, which was not only published in 2005, it also won the Belmont Book Award that year for Best Book on Country Music. Now here was this huge part of Ray's life, something he'd spent 15 years researching, and I didn't have the faintest idea. Now, this is probably one of the more distinctive stories that I haven't known about people, but the experience is true across the spectrum, and it's not limited to me. Almost every time I do a memorial service and there's a eulogy and the story of a person's life is shared, I hear someone walk out afterwards saying, "Wow, I never knew," fill in the blank. Why is it that we so often wait for eulogies for someone to be dead already, to find out some of the important stories of their lives? Part of me wonders if this is somewhat of a modern phenomenon. With our glut of information and our access to abundant information on the internet, is it possible that we've lost some of the art of knowing each other's stories? In this day and age of technology where it's not uncommon to walk into a room, say at a minister's retreat, as I did recently, and find that every single person had their head buried in a phone or a tablet or a computer, and no one was talking to each other. Have we forgotten how to create a space for sharing and telling of stories? In this day and age of extreme busyness where there's so much going on in our lives, have we lost track of the importance of slowing down and making space for the sharing of stories? I hear stories about how in the good old days, people used to sit on their porches in their neighborhoods at the end of the day, and their neighbors would come and visit and talk. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time imagining having enough time to sit on my porch for that long for someone to come by and talk to me. There's just so much going on, even if people did that kind of thing anymore, which we tend not to. I know there's technology. I know there's an information overload. I know there's busyness. I know there are books such as Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam about our increasing social isolation in America. And I wonder if we've lost some of the art of conversation. Now, I'm no expert, that's for sure, but I have been told at least a couple of times over the years that people have thought I've asked really good questions. And usually when this has happened, it's because I've taken a moment to try and think of something that the person answering might lead them to share more deeply. An example from recent past is, what have you done that's had the biggest positive impact on your life in the past 10 years? Instead of, hey, how about them cults? Or, what did you think of that workshop you just were at? Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I certainly make small talk as good as anybody, hopefully. But I just noticed that for myself, I'm finding that I really want to know more about the person and not just make small talk. I really want to have a meaningful experience of conversation. Now, of course, you can't usually go from 0 to 60 with someone you've just met, though you can try. But we often allow ourselves to stay on the surface when we could choose to go deeper. Sharing our stories matters because they help give our lives and our connections with others shape and meaning. I'll give you an example. I could tell you that I spent my junior year of college abroad in Japan, and that I learned a lot while I was there, and that I had a fantastic experience. Right? That's a little piece of information about me, a little story. And you would know something about me, something more about me, something you might consider interesting, perhaps. Or, I could tell you that when I lived in Japan for a year, one of the best memories I have was the completely crazy time my friend Reiji and I hitchhiked to climb Mount Fuji together with no money, no food, and no warm clothing. Really far from the smartest thing that I've ever done. It was cold, and I mean like really cold. We had to climb most of the night so the sun wasn't out. We actually ended up wearing our socks on our hands to try and stay warm. It was pretty miserable. And when we finally made the summit shortly before dawn, because that's when you're supposed to do it so that you can see the sunrise, it's supposed to be beautiful, all I wanted to do was get off that damn mountain. Fortunately, I stopped and took a whole roll of film, of pictures. Yes, this was back before digital cameras. And I'm glad that I did it, because those photos, when I got them developed 3 days later, were amazing. And I'll never forget the kindness and generosity of one of the women who picked us up, those two exhausted, hungry college kids, as we were hitchhiking home, and she stopped to buy us a meal after she heard our story. So, that's the story of my crazy hitchhiking trip to Mount Fuji, and I bet that it tells you more about my experience of Japan than me just sharing the information that I did earlier. When we share the stories of our lives with one another, something magical can happen. It doesn't happen every time, and not every story is one that creates or adds meaning. And there are people who can monopolize our time with stories we don't want to hear, or who are maybe desperate for connection and share stories that we wish they hadn't shared. Like most kinds of human experiences, sharing stories can be positive or negative, depending how it's done. But a story freely shared and freely and deeply received can have real power and real meaning. Can you recall a time that you shared a story and were truly listened to, seen, and held? My experience is that sharing and receiving can be really powerful. And so, of course, now I'm going to use a story to tell you a little bit more about how powerful and what kind of powerful I think that can be. It's a story from Timothy Paul Jones from the book he co-wrote titled Proof, and it goes like this. I never dreamed that taking a child to Disney World could be so difficult, or that a trip could mean so much and have so much to offer. Our middle daughter had been previously adopted by another family, and I'm sure this family had the best of intentions, but they never quite integrated her into their family with their biological children. And so after a couple of difficult years, they dissolved the adoption, and we ended up welcoming this 8-year-old girl into our home. Now, for one reason or another that I don't quite understand, whenever this previous family vacationed at Disney World, they took their biological children with them, but they left our daughter home with a family friend. And usually, at least in the child's mind, this happened because she did something wrong that precluded her presence on the trip. And so, by the time we had adopted our daughter, she had seen many pictures of Disney World, and she had heard about the rides and the characters and the parades. When it came to passing through the gates of the Magic Kingdom, she had always been left on the outside. Once I found out about this, the first thing I did was make plans to take her to Disney World. Now, I thought I had, he's continuing, right? I thought I had mastered the Disney World drill. I knew from previous experiences that the prospect of seeing cast members in freakishly oversized mouse and duck costumes somehow turns children into squirming bundles of emotional instability. What I hadn't expected was that the prospect of visiting this dream world would produce a stream of downright devilish behavior in our newest daughter. In the month leading up to our trip to the Magic Kingdom, she stole food when a simple request would have gained her a snack. She lied when it would have been far easier to tell the truth. She whispered insults that were carefully crafted to hurt her older sister as much as possible. And as the days on the calendar moved closer to the trip, her mutinies multiplied. A couple of days before our family headed to Florida, I pulled our daughter into my lap to talk through her latest shenanigans. I know what you're going to do, she said flatly. You are not going to take me to Disney World, are you? The thought actually hadn't crossed my mind, but her downward spiral suddenly started to make some sense. She knew she couldn't earn her way to the Magic Kingdom. She had tried and failed before, so she was living in a way that placed her as far as possible from the most magical place on earth. In retrospect, I'm embarrassed to admit that in the moment I was tempted to turn her fear to my own advantage. The easiest response would have been, if you don't start behaving better, you're right, we're not going to take you. But by God's grace, I didn't. Instead, I asked her, is this trip something we're doing as a family? She nodded, brown eyes wide and tear-rimmed. Are you part of this family? She nodded again. Then you're going with us. Sure, there's probably going to be some consequences for what you've done, but you're part of our family, and we're not leaving you behind. Now, it would have been awesome if her behavior magically got better at that moment. It didn't, and her choices fairly pretty much spiraled out of control at every hotel and rest up all the way there. Still, we headed to Disney World on the day we had promised, and it was a typical Disney day. Overpriced tickets, overpriced meals, and lots of lines, mingled with just enough manufactured magic to consider maybe going again someday. In our hotel room that evening, a very different child emerged. She was exhausted, pensive, and a little weepy at times, but her month-long facade of rebellion had faded. When bedtime rolled around, I prayed with her, held her, and asked, "So, how was your first day at Disney World?" She closed her eyes and snuggled down into her stuffed unicorn. After a few moments, she opened her eyes ever so slightly. "Daddy," she said, "I finally got to go to Disney World. But it wasn't because I was good. It was because I'm yours." It wasn't because I was good. It was because I'm yours. Oh, the story really gets me. It's a fantastic example of the importance of unconditional love. It just makes me want to wrap my arms around that little girl and hug her forever. Also makes me kind of want to yell at, or maybe smack the adoptive family who didn't take her. I mean, what's all that? But what a happy ending. It wasn't because I was good. It's because I'm yours. I think the same things happen sometimes when we share our stories, when we share our hearts and we are heard. When I share my story, when I share my heart with you, and I'm received and held with and in love, part of me becomes yours. When we share our stories, we share ourselves. When we courageously risk being vulnerable and share stories of deep meaning in our lives, we share of our hearts, and that sharing matters. And we need it. We human beings are wired to want and need that connection, to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged and accepted just for who we are. Sometimes even just the telling can bring about healing. In my ideal world, our church, our community, is a place where these tender stories, courageous stories, stories of our heart, can be and are told and shared and received and held in love with each other often. And it does happen here organically sometimes, which is wonderful. Often, though, those kinds of story-sharing opportunities come more easily if you've been a member for, say, 20 years and have a long-time circle of friends. And I know it happens sometimes at other points, but we can also create that kind of space if we wish. And boy, do I wish we had that kind of space where we did that kind of deep sharing all the time. We're going to try and create a little bit more of it, actually. We're launching a small group ministry program that Joel's helping us create. Probably going to call it connection groups, I think, where we're going to have opportunities in small groups to share some of these our stories, to have these more deep, meaningful connections. So there's sign-up sheets at the back. You'll hear more about it. We're just asking for your interest to sign up for your interest right now. There'll be more information forthcoming. And I implore you, don't wait for that. Seek out the stories. Ask better questions. If someone tells you, I spent my junior year abroad in Japan, and they stop right there, take the time to ask them, what was the most memorable thing that you did while you were there? And if someone asks you a question that offers the opportunity to go deeper, I hope you can find the courage and the strength to be vulnerable and to go there with them. Now, of course, I'm encouraging you to sign up for small group ministry when it happens, but that's not what this sermon is about. It's about encouraging us. It's about encouraging you and me to find and make and create the time and space in our lives to share stories with the people we care about. It's encouraging us, you, me, to care enough to ask questions that encourage others to go deeper. It's encouraging us to risk being vulnerable in appropriate situations and sharing our deeper stories. It's about sharing our hearts with ourselves, with each other, with one another. Stories matter. Find the space to tell a story. Create the space to hear a story. Share of yourself, receive someone else. Let yourself become theirs. Let them become yours. Become each other's.